All right, well, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. This is PrepperCon Radio, again, as usual, every Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the Rocky Mountains of gorgeousness. The weather's beautiful outside.
It is, and again, yet we are here yet again.
We've got our good friend Shane here with me, as always, and you know me, I'm Scott. If you want to join in the conversation, you can hop on 801-254-5855 is our phone line. We've got a special guest. We're going to be talking all things everyday carry knives today. Knives and tools.
And going into survival knives as well. So yes. Bushcraft, survival. And what I wanted to have, this is Ben Peterson of Blade HQ.
Good morning. What is up, guys?
Oh, dude, we're so happy to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those of you listening in, because you can't see anything, he has a plethora, I would say. A nice plethora of knives.
We probably have 20 knives on the table.
Yeah, at least.
We'll get you some nice gnat sounds there in the microphone.
There you go. Nice out the front knife. We're going to be talking about those a little bit too, and that may be otherwise known as a switchblade. To those of you who don't know what an OTF or out the front knife. So we wanted to have Ben on today because I think one of the most important things you can have with you every day is a good pocket knife, whether it be like a Swiss Army type folder or even a fixed blade. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So how do you choose? There are so many knives out there that are available. How do you choose what's right for you? Obviously, price has a big part of it, but that's what I really want to get into. And I find that because I always carry a knife on me, I get people asking me, "Hey, what's your carrying, and what kind of knife is it, and what should I get?" And so I love giving that kind of advice, but I'd rather have the professionals here giving that advice because I know that my opinion can be somewhat slanted, right, Scott?
Never.
No.
Ever. Always is the appropriate term, yes. And I'm impressed. We even have a Cub Scout BSA knife.
You bet, man.
I'm impressed.
I wanted to bring in kind of the gamut. This is actually, I found it in my dad's garage. What it is, it's a Cub Scout. I believe it's a case knife, kind of your traditional gentleman's folder. About 50 years ago, this was the kind of knife, in-pocket sort of pocket knife that everyone was carrying. And since then, it's kind of adapted to the point where you can have any sort of knife. You got folding knives. You got in fact, I brought a knife in today that it doesn't have any screws in it. You take it apart via a little wheel on the back. It's called a no-tool take-apart home front knife from CRKT. Just won Knife of the Year at Blade Show 2016 in Atlanta. That's a convention out in Atlanta where all the knife makers get together. So I guess my point there is knife technology has come a long way. Knife steels have come a long way in the last 50 years. And it's fun to be in the industry seeing this stuff happen kind of in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely want to talk about blade steels. I want to talk about different shapes and types of blades and all that kind of stuff. But let's talk a little bit about Blade HQ right off the bat so we don't forget to do that at the end. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, what's your background, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So Blade HQ is an online retailer. We're located right here locally in Lehi, Utah, just south of Lehi Roller Mills off I-15. We've been around about 12, 13 years, and we sell primarily on the internet. We do have a storefront in our store, so you can purchase there, walk in and handle the knives. But we basically sell knives anywhere from about $15 to $10,000 knives, custom knives with mammoth tooth inlays and things like that.
So for the collector as well as the practical prepper like us.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a fun industry. It's a small kind of homegrown family industry, and I get a kick out of it. I've been in it for about 5 years. Prior to this, I was working at Columbia River Knife and Tool up in the Portland area.
Great company.
Prior to that, I was at Blade HQ as well. So kind of been poking around this industry for about 5 years, having a really good time. I enjoy it. Can't seem to leave it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you won't be able to leave the store either when you go in the store. So let me tell you what I do. I go online to bladehq.com. I look at the different knives that catch my attention depending on what I'm looking for, and then I walk in the store and I ask to see these knives and hold them in my hand. And that's what I love about Blade HQ being here local. It is a fantastic site, and if you only get to shop online, this is really the place to shop. And I don't mean this to sound like an infomercial. I just love this site. I love this company. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have Ben on with us today, so that you guys out there can feel empowered to know where to go to find the right tool for you. Because a knife really is a tool, and I think it's extremely important for everyone to have one in there. You women in your purse, guys in your pocket, or in your professional bag, your business bag, to have that kind of tool with you. And in addition to knives, you guys also have multi-tools, flashlights, survival supplies, packs, so not just knives.
Yeah, looking at their website is very diverse. You can see a ton of different things there. And it's funny, like jumping back on knives, as a kid, my grandpa had an old gentleman's knife.
Old-timer,
an old-timer is what it was. And I just remember as a kid, every time he'd pull that out, he used that for everything, all the time. He's always using his knife. And I'm like, man, I can't wait till I grow up and I can actually carry a knife. Because my dad wouldn't let me carry my Cub Scout knife that I had that's the same one as on the table.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, you can take it camping, you can take it to Scouts, other than that,
you're not going to have
it home.
Can't take it to school and all that stuff.
Couldn't take it to school, still can't take it to school,
Yeah.
There's so many rules and regulations, but, never used it for anything other than cutting paper, cutting wood, opening bottles. It's such a practical pocket piece. We talk about EDC, or everyday carry. I carry a Kershaw. I love it. I don't have a need for pliers, but this one has screwdrivers sets. I've got a socket set with 4 different heads on my screwdrivers, and then I've got a bottle opener, and of course my fun blade, right?
And that's what I love about Blade HQ and being able to shop online, is you can really figure out what you need. Like for me, I carry a nice, it's just a 3-inch blade. It's a Spyderco. And then I also carry a multi-tool on me because I use pliers and I can use these other tools. Whereas, some of you probably will never need or may never need, pliers. But let me point this out. Once you have that tool on you, whether it's a small knife or a multi-tool like a Swiss tool, which is like what I prefer, you will find so many uses for it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like when you buy a certain car, you then instantly begin to notice all the other cars that are just like yours on the road. So once you start to use a knife or have one in your pocket, you're going to realize, man, how did I get along without having a knife before? And like you were saying, the old-timers, everybody used to have a knife in their pocket. It was common sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's kind of a resurgence in that, too. You look at what Instagram has done for showing people what's in your pockets. If you're familiar with the hashtag pocket dump on Instagram is huge, and you get to see what people are carrying. And a lot of people carry knives. And I think some of these folks that may not be quite into the prepper scene or the preparedness scene, they are seeing these pocket dumps and going, hey, maybe a pocket knife is useful for kind of my everyday tasks. I use mine all the time. In fact, I use the edge of mine, the back edge of my pocket knives a lot of times to screw in tripod heads. I do a lot of video and film work, and so there's a lot of uses for them. I think they're really fun, and they're a good conversation piece.
Absolutely.
I'm like that weirdo in the store. Like if I see a pocket clip hanging out, it's like, hey, you carry a knife?
Yeah.
What knife are you carrying? I'm kind of a creeper like that, but I get a real kick out of it. It's really interesting to me.
Well, once you get to spending time on Blade HQ and knowing the different knives, and like you say, seeing the pocket clip. So the pocket clip is what clips it to the inside of your pocket. The knife is on the inside of your pocket. The clip clips around the outside of your pocket, and you can, once you get to know, you can say, oh, I know he's carrying this brand or that brand, and then, like you say, it's a conversation piece. But for me, I grew up also having a Boy Scout knife. I got myself a nice Swiss Champ, when I was early teens. Carried that thing with me everywhere. Took it on planes. I took it on my mission with me. They ended up calling me MacGyver because I would always be using it.
Or for those of you that didn't understand it,
MacGyver in Spanish, with a Spanish accent.
What's funny is for me it was the same. I mean, I started off with my Cub Scout knife, and when I became a Boy Scout, I was like, Mom, I need a Boy Scout knife. And she's like, no, your knife is fine. I'm like, no, Mom, I need a Boy Scout knife. I'm not a Cub Scout anymore. And so I got a hand-me-down knife from my uncle. And this was the funniest, dumbest knife I've ever had. Because it had a fold-out fork and a fold-out knife on the outsides.
Right, yep.
And so it was like totally impractical as a knife. in every way because you couldn't hold it correctly because you had, and it wasn't just a spoon. It was like a serving spoon, huge,
like
spoon.
a soup spoon.
Yeah,
almost,
no,
yes.
it was just huge. I'm like, am I dishing out food for everybody or like what the heck? And it had you couldn't fit it in your pocket. It was so wide, but it was just. I hated that knife, and I was so excited when I was finally able. I saved up enough money and I got a Spyderco knife. I was about 14, and I was like, yes! My buddy was like huge into Spyderco. He's like, dude, you got to get one of these knives. You got to get one of these. And he had like 6 by the time I finally got one. I was spending all my lawnmower money on food and he's, Taco Bell and all that fun stuff. And he's all, I got another knife. I got another tool. I got a crossbow. And I'm like, I should probably invest in some cool stuff instead of food.
Yeah, and once you start shopping around for knives and actually appreciating the value of a good knife, then you really start to get into collecting, wanting to collect the different knives. I'm still very practical. I'm not much of a collector, but I believe in redundancy and having duplicates of each. So having just one knife isn't good enough for me because what if I were to mistreat that and it were to break or to lose it or something like that or get stolen, I need to have a backup.
Absolutely. And I think that it's funny because one of the things about my knife, I picked this up on my way to SHOT Show a couple years ago, and I love this knife. It's been the most versatile knife I've ever owned. I've got some pliers. I've got a Leatherman, but I hate carrying it because you've got to pretty much carry it on a belt. I love this knife because it's a clip knife. I can just slide it in my pocket, pull it out when I need it. It's not it's not so big that it's causing any problems. It's nice. It's slimline, but it's funny because as soon as I saw them being sold here, I went and picked up another one, and I actually lost the one I bought as my backup because I put my original my regular one in a box when we were moving, and I pulled my backup out and put it in my pocket, and then I went camping a few weeks ago, and I lost that knife. It got clipped on something, and I lost it right out of my pocket. Never found it again. And I'm like, oh.
But then you had your backup.
But I had my backup as soon as I got in the car. I'm like, there's my other one.
Yep.
And it's so good. You always want to have, in my opinion, you always want to have 3 or 4 knives. Like in my car right now, I've probably got 6 different knives. Well, 5 different knives because I just pulled one out. I've got my cold steel kukri, which I love. It's great for when I'm camping and stuff.
Which is one of his doomsday weapons as well.
Well, I wouldn't really call it my doomsday weapon. But it is a good self-defense tool if it comes down to it, if you know how to use it. Otherwise, you might as well be swinging a stick.
And as we're coming up on our first break, when we come back, I'd like to talk about, how is best to choose a good pocket knife. And then after the second break, I would like to talk about survival knives, bushcraft knives, so forth. Because I believe everybody should have in their bug-out bag, whatever bag you want to call it, have an everyday carry knife on you, and then have a nice quality fixed blade that you can really do some serious work with. That a pocket knife is not going to hold up to that type of different types of heavy duty work.
Exactly, because not all knives have the same purpose, and I think that's what most people forget. They're like, oh, go to pocket knife, I'm good. Well, nah, you're not.
Yeah.
There's different types of tools for different types of projects.
Like this little Spyderco, it's got like a 1.5 inch, maybe 2 inch blade, and it's kind of hard to hold. It's like a 2-finger, 3-finger knife, but it's a very lightweight, small knife that you could easily keep in your pocket. That's not going to be intrusive on anything. And
the cool thing about that one too is it's got a steel on it that won't rust. I've taken it scuba diving. It's stellar. So
awesome. Well, we're hitting a break here. We want to remind everybody, PrepperCon Radio is actually sponsored by Survival Medical. These guys are the only first aid kit designed for long-term storage. Check them out, survival-medical.com. It's what I carry. I love them. I keep a couple packs in my car, and hopefully I don't ever have to use them, but they're there when I need them. Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. Thanks for sponsoring the show. Hey, guys, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a break and a moment from our sponsors.
Hi, it's Sherilyn Eager with the Liberty.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to PrepperCon Radio, sponsored by our good friends over at survival-medical.com. If you didn't check them out on the break, check them out now while we're talking. We're going to jump into a fun conversation on how to choose the right knife to carry, kind of your EDC, which is everyday carry. Everyone has different things they like or dislike in life. I mean, some people are into shoes and they only wear loafers. Some people, women in their high heels, I don't understand it because I don't want to have ergonomic problems and back problems later in life. But shoes are important. Knives are just as important. the tool that fits you is what you want to find. What are you using it for? What are you going to be using it for? What do you envision yourself using it for? And what kind of emergencies might it be helpful for? Like I mentioned, my grandpa, he always carries his old timer. He still does. And I remember watching him clean out his fingernails, in church. He just cleaning out
I do
his
that.
fingernails with his little old timer. And I mentioned my grandpa.
Sorry, guys.
And we got a video playback going on in the background.
Snapchat, guys.
You
gotta snap this stuff, right?
So and it was funny because I always used to like sit there in church and lean over and like, Grandpa, can I play with your knife? And he's like, no. And I'd see my grandma would hand him some like cloth to cut or something, like just random, like, hey, oh, I need your knife. Hey, oh, I need your knife. She didn't have an everyday carry. She had an everyday spouse that was always around that she could get the knife from. And I'm kind of looked at the same way in my family. It's like my wife's always like, oh, do you have your knife? Well, yes, I do.
Well, of course I do.
And last night I failed miserably.
Uh-oh.
I switched from pants to shorts, and I was in a hurry, and I forgot to load all my pockets. And we're setting up for my brother-in-law's getting married. I'm setting up the church, the little not the chapel, the overflow area, and we're setting up all the decorations. And they're like, "Oh, do you have a screwdriver?" I'm like, "Yes,
I don't have a screwdriver."
Dang it! And then I'm like trying to work all these different screws without a screwdriver. I'm like, this is stupid. Why did I forget my knife?
Yeah, absolutely. And with all these knives splayed out here on the table, some are very small and some are very large. So what is the right size for you? And there are different types of steels. The handles are made of different materials. There are so many different ones to choose, even small fixed blade ones, which could be used for everyday carry as well. So Ben, why don't you guide us through your process of choosing a knife for a particular person or use or whatever, what have you?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I ask somebody when they say, hey, what knife should I buy? I say, how are you going to use it? And some folks are big knife guys. In fact, both the guys here in the studio, both Scott and Shane, are holding
big knives,
big old fat knives with 4-inch blades. So these are folding knives with 4-inch blades. I prefer a 3-inch blade. Under 3-inch blade. It's just
for your everyday carry.
For everyday carry. Very unobtrusive.
But how cool is it to have this 4-inch blade knife and pull it out of your pocket? And I did that once, and I have some Benchmade. I've got a nice 4-inch Benchmade, and I was carrying that once, and I pulled it out, and I'm using it, and the person who I was with said, I wasn't surprised that you had a pocket knife. I was just surprised at how big it was. Yeah. So a 4-inch blade can be considered a pretty big knife. I think a 4-inch blade is really big. For me personally, I like just under 3 inches, about 2 inches. Most of my everyday carry knives are right in that range. So that's the first thing I ask somebody is, what are you going to use it for? If you're working on a farm or you're kind of in manual labor, blue-collar stuff, you might carry a bigger blade because you're probably going to need it. That's what you need it for.
For me, I work in an office. I use my knives to open letters.
And boxes.
And boxes and things like that. So that's the first thing is, how big do you want it? And then how much do you want to spend? I mean, you can blow $200-300 on a knife like that. And for me, I'm more budget conscious. I typically carry a $60 to $70 knife. For some folks, that's going to be really expensive. For others, it's going to be reasonable. But you get what you pay for with this stuff. We were talking prior to the show about how Kershaw makes a great $15, $30 knife. CRKT makes a great $25 knife. But the edge is not going to hold as long.
So when you talk about edges, basically there's different shapes to blades. There's different grinds to blades. There are different steels.
Grinds meaning?
As in the profile, I guess you would call it, of the blade, right?
So when you think about a knife, the reason a knife cuts is because they've put it on a grinding wheel, and they have honed that edge to be sharp.
So there's different types of edges you can actually create.
Exactly.
And they're for different types of uses as well. We need to point that out.
Exactly. So as you use that knife over time, that edge is going to become more and more dull, and you need to rehone it. So a lot of the cheaper knives are using a steel called 8CR13. It's a Chinese steel. Some people call it alphabet soup steel. But it's lower grade, holds a decent edge. It's easy to sharpen.
And you do find that a lot in the lower priced.
You do. That's kind of the go-to steel for a lot of stuff you'd find at your big box stores, things like that.
But there are cheaper steels out there.
There absolutely are. I mean, you can buy a $4 gas station knife that they who knows what steel it is. And for some folks, that's going to be just what they need.
And it'll serve its purpose for a time.
Yep.
But when it comes down to it, you probably want a better quality steel, and it's going to have to do with how well it holds up to being rust-proof, oils, different things you subject it to.
Exactly. And, it's funny, working at CRKT for 2.5 years, I always carried knives with, say, 8 CR13 steel. That's just kind of what they make in. They're kind of a budget-friendly knife company. Well, you start carrying, I recently moved back to Blade HQ, you start carrying a knife with 440C steel or VG10, and they hold an edge better. Like, you can't deny it. You start spending more of that. Shane's holding a paramilitary 2 from Spyderco.
With the CPM S30V steel, which is a very, very good steel.
Which was developed specifically for knives. I think some people don't realize, there's an entire industry of steel makers that only make knife steels. It's specially developed to hold the edge well, the most rust resistance that you can get. So it's a vibrant industry, and it's a lot of fun to see what people come up with.
Now, the knife I carry is also a Spyderco, and I've chosen to carry this one because I love the ergonomics of the handle. It has, on the back, it has jimping, which is these fine cuts into the back of the blade, and on the choil, which is right near the blade edge, has more jimping as well. So I can really kind of choke up on this knife and use it for finer work than maybe some other knives. And I see that this paramilitary has the same jimping as well, which I really like. Instead of holding further back on the handle, I can choke up and get really good control on this knife. And I also like a knife that has a long handle that my entire hand can get wrapped around, that it's not too small, not too short, not too narrow. And that's one of the reasons I really like these Spydercos in particular. There are a lot of great knives, but this is one I've chosen to carry nowadays.
Yeah, I carry my typical carry these days is it's a pretty classic knife. It's called a Benchmade Griptilian. Benchmade's a company up in Portland. They make only USA made products, and they have a lock on here that's ambidextrous, so you can use it with either hand. But just a stellar knife. I think I spent probably about $80 on this one, which is a lot of money for me. I'm a cheap tightwad, but
well, Benchmade's, you're not going to find anything really less than $70-$80.
No, you're not. But it's funny. Just kind of going back to Scott's point, he lost a knife. How many knife tears do you want to shed for what you spend on it? Because they will get caught on things. They will fall out of your pocket. So
you spend $250 on a knife and you lose it.
Yep.
Well, for example, like my survival knife. I've got, I shouldn't say my survival knife. My survival knives. I've got 3 grades. One that I keep on the outside of the pack. 2 that I keep on the inside of the pack. And then those ones, when I get to where I'm going, then I'll strap those on. I don't worry about the one on the outside of the pack as much. It's a $40 knife. $40 isn't cheap, but it's also not high grade.
And you're not
so I don't worry about it as much.
Yeah. A great way to choose.
Yeah, because I've got a K-Bar, which I love, but then I've also got a Smith & Wesson version that I got from my brother-in-law that I'm like, I am not losing that because he got that while he was a Ranger. I'm like, no, we're going to take care of that one.
Yeah, those stay at home. Those kinds of knives stay at home for me.
Well, that stays in the bag.
Yeah.
Because it's such a good, versatile knife. It's the balancing in it is great. I don't envision myself ever getting to a situation where I'm having to knife fight, and I hope I never do. But when it comes to versatility, it's just a great knife. It's a good handle. It's a good weight, and it's a strong blade.
That's another consideration is the shape of the blade for defensive purposes. Typically, you think of maybe a dagger or something like that, where it's sharp on both sides, and that's not necessarily always the best defensive knife, because it's not going to be very friendly to your everyday uses, having a blade that's sharpened on both sides. Whereas this knife that I carry, it has what's called a leaf shape blade, and so it is pointed. And it has a drop point, and so it comes to a very fine point. So it is a good knife for defensive use, but also for everyday use.
The funny thing, and I don't know what your training is or anything. I have no training in knife fighting, zero. And kind of what I've heard from a lot of folks is if you don't have that training, don't consider your knife a defensive tool. I mean, I would imagine that me personally would be much more effective with my fists and my knees and like biting, scratching, running away than with a knife. Now, if you go out and get that training, I think more power to you. Carry the right knife for the right job.
Right.
But for me personally, no experience. So to me, carrying a knife is having that tool in place if I need
Exactly.
it for everyday tasks.
I think that's going to sum up about 95% of the population.
90, I'd go 99 on that.
Well, I think 5% have the misconception that they're like, well, they're either of the 5% are there's the smart ones that know what they're doing that have been trained, and then there's the other probably 3% that are like, oh, this is my self-defense knife. It's great, you know. Every knife has a different type of purpose. You can repurpose your knife for anything. Like, I love carving when I'm in the mountains. I love carving. So for me, I need a smaller blade for that, but I also need a large blade for, you know, shaping the large wood into the piece that I want to then carve smaller. And so it makes sense, absolute sense to me to have my large kukri and then a 3-inch blade or smaller. In fact, I actually carry a utility knife when I go camping as well, because you can't cut as finely with anything else.
Yeah, and imagine trying to gut a fish, clean a fish with a kukri.
Yeah, not going to work very
Not going to happen.
So having, you know, multiple tools of each, especially like we're talking here, what are you going to use it for?
Well, it's like a knife set in your kitchen.
Yeah, there you go.
Every knife has a different purpose, and so you need to understand and recognize that. And when you go looking for a knife, think of the different uses that you're using it for. Talk to the salesman. Hopefully they're a knowledgeable salesman. They can explain what different types of knife blades are designed for, and the different types of cuts, the grinds on the blade. Find out what's going to work best for what you're looking for, because you may find that, you know, something may look cool and be amazing and be great, and you were like, yeah, I'm going to spend $90 on this knife, and then realize none of the features about it work for what you're going to use it for.
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that.
I think we've all done that.
Yeah.
And it's just part of the learning curve of being a knife owner.
Yeah, here's one that I purchased a Microtech like this out the front, as you can hear it. Switchblade type knife, and the steel was Elmax. Brand new steel, very high end, very expensive steel. I could not sharpen that thing.
Yeah,
so difficult to sharpen. So taking into account that this knife was very expensive, the steel was very high end, but I couldn't sharpen it well enough. So what good is that tool to me? And it is
utility.
Exactly, and it's out. It's an out the front knife, so it's really more of a defensive knife. It's more of a
knife.
It is a plunging knife. It is, but it's more like, oh, cool. Let me show you my cool knife. It's a switchblade. You know, it's freaking cool.
Kind of a man toy.
It is, absolutely.
Honest, right?
And so I just don't carry it. You know, it's very cool. But I just don't care because I don't want to have to sharpen that thing because it's so difficult to sharpen with traditional means, with your traditional stones and so forth, or diamonds and so forth. So really take into account. Here's another thing I wanted to say that also Scott brought up is the aesthetics of the knife. I love the way this knife looks that I carry. It is the handle is this is a polymer, or it's a resin fiberglass filled.
Fiberglass reinforced nylon.
There we go.
A fancy name for plastic.
Plastic, yes. It's a plastic handle, so it's super lightweight.
Yeah, it holds up though. It's a really strong plastic. I think plastic has such a negative connotation with it, but it holds up great. I own a lot of fiberglass reinforced
nylon
knives.
And then there's polymers as well. So like polymers similar to what handguns are made out of.
Yep, exactly.
For the grip, for the handle, instead of like a traditional aluminum or a steel. And we're talking about the frame, the handle of the folding knife itself. That actually, as you fold the blade back, it encases the blade.
Yeah.
And there's all different kinds of materials to choose from as well. And I think that's an absolute factor, that the texture on that grip on the handle, the shape of it, and then also the locking mechanism, like you begin to bring up. The one you're probably familiar with is, what is this called? What is this standard lock called here?
It's called a back lock. It's kind of a traditional lock that comes off, basically popularized by the Buck 110.
Okay, yes.
Like most folks are probably familiar with your classic Buck knife. So that's what's called a back lock or a lock back. And most cases, it's a two-handed closer.
Exactly.
For me, I prefer a one-handed closer just because it makes it a little bit easier. So, for instance, your Spyderco Mannix that you're carrying has a special lock on it from Spyderco that is ambidextrous. You can close it with one hand just by flipping it down. So that's a consideration for me too. When I go to buy a knife, how does it open? How does it close?
How does it lock and so forth? And I for me, for an everyday carry knife, it does need to be operated by one hand, both opening and closing. I think that's a very important trait for an everyday carry knife. So I know some of these manufacturers tout, okay, our knives are stronger when they're open, like the cold steel, because of this lockback type. And they're probably right, it's probably stronger, but is that really something that's important to me in my everyday carry knife? No, it's not. It's more ease of use, which this may not be the most durable lock, but it's good. I would say good enough, or probably better than what I really need to use it for every day.
Yeah, the funny thing about having a pivot is anytime you introduce some sort of mechanism into a knife, it's going to weaken it. By having that pivot there, it means that, your knife is not going to be as strong. Even though, for instance, Cold Steel has their triad lock, which is very strong. It holds up extremely well. They've done a lot of testing on it. But it's not a fixed blade. A fixed blade, full tang fixed blade is one piece of steel. You can't beat one piece of steel if you've got any sort of structural mechanism in there. So,
and that's what we're going to talk about after this next break.
Yes, we're going to go more into the bushcraft survival knives, which typically are single tang. One solid piece of steel with a handle wrapped around it, or sometimes just the same molding. I've seen railroad spikes turned into pretty cool survival knives.
Yeah,
and you can do a lot of different things. The key, I think, we're gonna hope that you take away from this entire episode is there are so many options out there. You got to find out what's right for you. What's going to be the best solution for you in your pocket.
You're going to make some mistakes.
So we want to thank Ben for being here. We're going to continue with him in just a minute. Before we cut out for this break, we want to just remind you, check out Survival Medical. These guys have the best first aid kit for long-term storage. This is your one-stop shop. Check them out. They've got some Father's Day specials going on right now. Go to survival-medical.com. We'll be right back. I feel like our music is getting more and more interesting every time. I don't know what you're doing while I'm gone.
Same music.
It just as the show goes on.
Oh, I see.
Throughout the hour, it's like starts off
a little more tame.
It's a little more crazy as the show goes on. So, hey, you guys are listening to PrepperCon Radio here on K-Talk. KTKK. K-Talk. You can find us at KTKK on Twitter, K-Talk Utah on Facebook. You can call in at 801-254-5855. And you can stream everything with our app. Go to k-talk.com. Check out the app. It's pretty dang awesome. You can listen to us anywhere in the world. Actually, a lot of our listeners are out of state, out of country, which is surprising that we have that big of a reach as an AM station.
It's pretty awesome.
In fact, the other day a month and a half ago I was in Idaho Falls. I could still barely pick up the station. Pocatello, it's a little clear. But man, we've got pretty good reach here all over northern Utah into Idaho. Give us a shout out wherever you are. Hop on social media and let us know where you are on our Facebook page. And in the meantime, check out Survival Medical. You've heard them before. I keep talking about them all the time. That's what I carry in my car. That's what I carry in my bag, because I can set it in there and forget about it until I need it.
And it'll be good.
I don't have to worry about my bandages no longer being adherent. I don't have to worry about my alcohol pads being dried up. I don't have to worry about my antibiotic being powder. That's the problem with a lot of the different things you get is you buy it thinking I'm not going to use it for a while. It's okay. But just those plastic kits that you can buy at Walmart, they expire the fastest. The Band-Aids lose their adhesion. So you want to make sure you get a good kit. So check out survival-medical.com. We're here with Ben with bladehq.com. And we're talking all things knives. Right now we're going to kind of switch gears and talk more about survival knives, which is primarily your full tang blades.
And I guess you can also, of course, get to Blade HQ on Facebook as well.
You can. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. We're all over it. I wanted to throw in there, too, just on this radio show, we want to do a little promo. If you purchase from Blade HQ and use the code PREPPER at checkout, you get a free schmog. If you're not familiar with what a schmog is, it's basically a scarf that you can use, put it over your head, keep the sun off your head, or use it as a tourniquet, different things. But
cool.
use the code PREPPER at bladehq.com, and you can get a free schmog with your order.
Very cool.
Nice. Everybody needs a schmog. They're so versatile. It's almost as versatile a tool as a knife.
Absolutely.
Wow, I didn't have my mic on. Sorry about that, guys. Hey, I was just saying, everyone needs a schmog. They're so versatile. It's just as versatile as having a knife. You can use it in so many different ways, whether it's first aid, whether it's keeping yourself warmer or cooler, providing shade. It's just nice to have. So go get that. we've got a caller that actually has questions on knife sharpening, and I think that's a good question.
Absolutely.
Eric, are you there?
Yes, gentlemen. When I'm sharpening my knife, you're talking about angles earlier. How do you know what angle you need, and how do you know when you're doing it right? If you're doing it wrong, you'll have to start all over, and then what?
Yeah, really good question. So typically knives are ground from the factory, usually about 18 to 20 degrees. So do you know what kind of sharpener you're using? Is it a Spyderco sharpener or stones, or what are you using?
What's the big popular one everybody gets for Christmas and then never opens?
Wow, that's a really broad question. I have no idea. There's a couple out there. There's like pull-through sharpeners that are not ideal. Spyderco Sharpmaker is the one I own. It's got two stones at an angle. Smith's makes some sharpeners. Mm-hmm. Does that ring any bells?
I think so. I'm almost there. Let me look.
In transit. Here he goes.
One of my favorite things is actually some good oil and a honing stone.
Yep.
A
two-sided stone. One side's rougher, the other side's smoother for your fine edge. But then you can actually match it up with your blade. And what I'm of the school that you throw a line of graphite on your blade, like a pencil, right?
Mm-hmm. You can use a Sharpie too.
Yeah, you can use a Sharpie too. Actually, that's probably even better than graphite. But you cover that edge. And then you take a few passes on your stone to see if you're pulling the edge off evenly. If you are, then you know you're at the right angle. If you're not, then you adjust your angle until you get it right, and then you go to town. And then, if it's two sides of the blade or if it's a single side of the blade, you work it that way.
And there's always the debate on, okay, how sharp do I need my knife? Do I need it so sharp that I can shave with it? Or do you just need it functionally sharp? Which, like you're saying, just having a rough side and a finer side is really all that I personally need. Maybe a diamond to finish it off or something. But I don't think, especially with the everyday carry knife or maybe a bushcraft or survival knife, you don't need that razor sharpness on there.
You know what's funny too is, and this kind of goes along with the sharpening idea, a lot of folks are sharpening on a regular basis when in reality they could be stropping. Now stropping, you use a leather belt, and you just hone that edge because you don't need to take a ton of material off to get it back to hair shaving sharp. So I use a old leather belt, and just pull my knife along there at the angle it's already ground to, sharpened to, and a lot of times that'll take it back to hair popping sharp.
One thing that I'll use is the ceramic, like the little Smith's one, and every once in a while I'll just make a few passes on that, takes the burrs off of it, and keeps it sharp without really removing much material.
Do you guys have any recommendations on like a YouTube video that shows good sharpening techniques?
Yeah, I mean, how to sharpen a knife. Look it up on YouTube. We've got a bunch of videos that we've made on sharpening, but there's a ton of them out there that will get your angles right and that sort of thing. A lot of sharpeners have angles built into them too. Spyderco Sharpmakers like that. The Wicked Edge is like that. You can drop a healthy amount of money on a sharpener as well. But I mean, if you're doing a sharpening stone, I think the Sharpie trick is a good way to do it. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I have two of those Smith sharpening kits. One of them's got the angle things that are already set up, and then the other one's the old Boy Scout stone with one. How do you tell when you need the Arkansas stone or the other stone? How do you know when your knife is sharp enough to move to the next level?
So typically the rougher stone, I think that's the Arkansas. I use that when I've started to divot my blade. Otherwise, I use the other side, the smoother side, because you're just refining that edge, just keeping it clean. And you don't want to sharpen. Like for me, I sharpen my knife depending on how often I use it, every quarter. So about 4 times a year. And sometimes I'll go a half a year without sharpening because I haven't used it that much. But when I start using it all the time, you'll sharpen it more often. And if you're not banging it around, you don't really need to use the Arkansas side at all. Unless, of course, you've dropped your blade or, something's happened and you've kind of messed up that edge. But look at the edge, look at it in good lighting, tilt it, twist it. Look to see if there's any imperfections and any weaves or irregularities in the blade. And that'll tell you if you need to shave more off or if you just need to refine that edge. You can even just refine that edge on the edge of your window. Your car window, the top beveled edge of your car window, you can actually use that as a sharpening
it's true.
solution, and it works really well. I've actually tested it.
Wait. How does that work?
YouTube the video.
Yes.
Sharpen your knife on a car window.
So the window itself has a beveled edge. It's kind of a rounded edge at the top. So it's not terribly critical what angle you hold your knife as you pass it along the edge of that. Similar you would like a diamond stone. You're kind of whittling away with the knife across the top of the edge of your window, so that you're taking the birds. It's not the best, obviously the best method, but it's a quick way to sharpen it up real quick if you need it in a pinch.
Yeah, leather belt's going to do better just to keep that edge refined. A nice old wide leather belt works best, and then you'll find you watch. Man, your old time barbershop guys.
Oh yeah,
when they're finding their
Strapping.
blade, they're strapping it. Yeah, they're stropping. Sorry, I keep saying strapping. It's stropping, and it's because it's such a good way to keep that edge clean and pristine.
Yep.
And it's hard to mess that up too.
It is.
That's true.
It is.
I can do it. Anyone can do it. That's the key. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, very much so.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for calling in. We appreciate you.
All right, so I guess on to more of the fixed blades, the survival bushcraft. Now, when I think survival knife, I think maybe everybody thinks kind of a Rambo-ish type knife, right? But that's not necessarily what you need for a survival knife, right? What is your ideal size, weight, thickness, material for a survival / bushcraft type knife?
I went through this whole debate 3 or 4 years ago, and you work in a knife shop. The way I shop for knives is I put them all on my desk and leave them there for about a week and play with them as I work.
Yeah.
And I settled on an SE4, and I actually have it here in the studio. I'll just kind of try to describe it to you.
ESEE is kind of the initials.
SE, yep, ESEE. This is an SE4. It's got a powder coat epoxy on it, or just a powder coating on it. So that's going to keep the rust off it. So that was something that was important to me.
So it's a 1095 steel, which is not a stainless steel.
It's a high carbon steel. I do keep I actually just use vegetable oil on it.
So this knife will rust because it's not a stainless steel. So even if, like in my basement, which is humid, if I leave my knives down there without having a light coat of oil on it, they will begin to rust just by sitting there.
And nothing special. You can use 3-in-1 gun oil. I use vegetable oil just because it's food safe. But I looked at this one. I think it's about a 3.5-inch blade on it. The handle fits my hand nicely. It's got a micarta. So micarta is basically it's a grippy material that is layers of fabric that they've glued together. It stays in good shape when you get it wet, or if it gets bloody or whatever, if you're cleaning an animal.
A good hold on the knife.
But I looked at it. This is the knife I keep in my bug out bag. I keep it there simply because it's good for food prep. It's big enough to prep stuff. It's small enough not to be huge or super heavy.
Yeah, you could gut a fish with it very easily. It's not too big.
Yep.
But you could also dress a deer with it.
You could, absolutely.
And you could baton wood with it, or a rabbit.
Yeah, and I like to go out and baton. I've never used this in a survival situation, but I like to take it camping and just beat on it. It's fun to baton with. It's full tang, meaning that the piece of steel goes all the way through the knife.
To the handle. Yeah.
And this one, I think, what did I pay for it? About $90 on this one. I debated between this one and another one called the Bob by a company out of Idaho Falls called Tops. And this knife is designed by actually a local here in Utah designer named Mikhail, who does tons of bushcraft. It's a beautiful knife. It's got a Scandi grind, which a lot of bushcrafters like the Scandi grind.
So if you notice the difference between these two knives, this has basically a flat grind, and right at the edge is sharpened. The very tip of the blade. This one has the SE4 is like a 3/16 thick steel, so it's still fairly thick. Yeah. But the Bob is a 1/4 inch, correct?
I don't think that's a 1/4 inch. That's
okay, it's still 3/16 or so. A little bit thicker.
A little thicker than a 3/16, but it's wider all the way through. It doesn't start edging from the back. It goes forward and then edges. Yeah,
so a Scandi grind, you're basically grinding to zero, meaning 0 degrees. So on a Scandi grind, it's supposed to carve better. It's supposed to be better for detail work. I don't use my knives enough to even... I mean, if it's a big fat grind, it's not going to cut an apple as well,
right,
or things like that. But I don't get into the super particulars as much, simply because I'm kind of a casual knife user, to be honest. I mean, I carry one every day. I take them camping. But I'm not out doing bushcraft on the weekends for fun. That's just not what I'm into at this point.
And here's a knife that I picked up. It's called a Moor knife, or Moor kniv, I guess is the proper way to say it.
Yep.
Out of Sweden. And it's a very inexpensive knife. This one not particularly, but they make a $10 knife in either a carbon steel or in a stainless steel, correct? And it's $10, and it does have a Scandi grind on there.
It's a smaller perfect. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You don't have to go out and spend $90 on an SE4. You can go and buy
120
or 120 or whatever
on this tops. Yeah,
you can go out and spend $10-15, throw it in your bug out bag. In fact, sometimes I kind of lament the quality of gear in my bug out bag that I'm not using on a regular basis because I like to keep it in there if I ever had to jump and run. Simply because
it's a lot of money hanging out there.
It's a lot of money sitting there where I could take this $15 knife and stick it in there, and chances are
you get a couple of them.
Heaven forbid I ever have to use it, but if I ever did, it'd do a great job.
Yeah, and get a couple of them.
In the meantime, I can enjoy my knife.
The other fun thing with your bug out bag is, or your 72-hour kit, but when you get to a barter situation, it's always good to have extra knives because people are going to need those. I love my bag. I've got some more expensive knives and some very cheap knives for that very purpose. I've got probably 3 junk knives. I call them that because they're between $5 and $10 knives. They're great, they work, but they're not the knives that I choose, the knives that are my favorites to work with all the time. So, what I want you to take away from this today, listeners, is there's so many different types of knives. Find what works for you and what works for what you're trying to accomplish. Get the tool for the job. That's everything we want to focus on with PrepperCon Radio. All of our shows, we want to make sure we're helping you get the tools that you need for the job. And again, we're sponsored by survival-medical.com. Check them out. They've got some great deals. Thank you, Ben, from BladeHQ.com.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.